Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. Tonight we have Derek Brown back with us. Derek, it's great to have you.
Great to be here.
We go way back. I really appreciate your running. Why don't you tell people a little bit? I know we made an introduction before, but tell people about you and why you're running, and really after that, let's talk just a little bit about what the Attorney General does.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and a lot of people assume that the Attorney General is just someone who knows how to litigate or practice law, and it's completely wrong. I mean, the Attorney General is a leadership role. It's really what you need is someone with a kind of a wide variety of a background of skills in the law. And a lot of people know me sort of through my public service, or they know me as being, chair of the Utah Republican Party. But a lot of them don't realize it's kind of my legal background. And I actually I've worked in two of the largest firms in the world. If you Google like the 20 largest law firms in the world, I've worked in two of them. And I also spent a year of my life working for a federal judge in his chambers. And it was an amazing experience because it was an appellate judge. And so we reviewed every kind of case and every kind of appeal, from antitrust to criminal law to sentencing to just contractual issues. And so I spent time doing that. I was in D.C., and ironically, that firm, the second firm that I worked for, I was recruited by Senator Mike Lee, who wasn't a senator at the time. He was just Mike, a good friend of mine that I knew. And so I left there and spent a number of years on Capitol Hill. I was chief counsel for Senator Bob Bennett. And that was an amazing experience to take my legal background and then apply it to what happens on the Hill. I called it the belly of the beast, because that's where we get to see not just how law is made, but how that interacts with all the regulatory agencies and some of the overreach that we see. And that's where it stems from. So we moved back to Utah. I worked for a period of time with Senator Hatch. I practiced law with a firm in Utah. I served in the House of Representatives. And then from there, I ran Senator Lee's offices for a number of years. And then the last 7 or 8 years, I've had my own private practice and represented some of the largest and smallest companies on the planet, and did everything from legal work to government relations work. So anyway, I have, I think, about as broad a cross-section of experience in the law of anyone that I know. Right.
Well, and some people don't understand that Attorney General is a political position as well, right?
Fundamentally, yes, it is.
Yeah, I heard one of the candidates basically say that if the legislature didn't do things that they felt was important, they'd hold a press conference, right? But that's not the way the legislature works.
Yeah, that's
right?
Great if you have no idea that this is a political position. But if you try to strong-arm the legislature, they'll just cut your funding. So what you have to do is you have to work with people. I mean, this is not a litigator position. In fact, what you don't want is a litigator in this position. That's probably the worst kind of personality. What you want is a leader who can bring people together and work with the legislature, work with the governor. And I mean, if you need to stand alone as Attorney General, you do it. I mean, I've stood alone as party chair. I've stood alone on a number of occasions as the legislator. And that's what you have to do sometimes. But ultimately, the role of the Attorney General is to bring people together and solve problems. Because if your first default is just litigation, you're going to waste a lot of resources. Your job should be, how do I solve problems? And then pick specific issues that you can work on to litigate. I mean, my issues are going to be things like federal overreach. There's so many areas where the federal government has overreached into our lives. But anyway, to answer
bringing that up, this idea of overreach. I know there's this case still pending out there, the Chevron.
And we should hear. And I mean, the court's term ends usually the second week in June, and we'll know any moment.
So you expect we will have a decision?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I've spent my career watching closely what happens at the Supreme Court, and we've got a majority conservative or constitutionally minded court for the first time,
especially
really in our lives.
With
John,
respect to this issue, right? The federalism, right? A lot of people don't realize that the Roe v. Wade case was not about abortion. It was about federalism.
It was about
right?
a 10th Amendment issue. Exactly. Well, in this case, for those who aren't aware, it's called Chevron deference, and it's been this concept since the Supreme Court issued a decision in 1984 where agencies sort of get to run free with statutory interpretations. And so if they take a regulation that they make up and it goes beyond what Congress gave them authority to do, the courts just defer to them. They let them do it. And for the first time in 40 years, we actually may have a chance to pull that back, which would benefit Utah in energy, in lands, in our companies operating here. I mean, this is potentially the single biggest Supreme Court case of the year, or I would say of the decade.
Which has direct influence over, say, the federal lands issues.
Absolutely.
This particular case, it was a fishery thing, right? Where the agency basically said they should they have these inspectors that go on the boats, and they were telling the fishery, well, you have to not only give them a room on the boat because they go out for a while, right?
But pay for them.
But pay for them.
And what's interesting is the statute itself, the underlying statute, didn't say that. So it's a perfect example where the federal agency went beyond what the statute allowed them to do,
But under Chevron deference, then if these things go to court, the judge basically looks at the agency and says, how do you interpret that?
Exactly.
Right?
Do you think you were justified in doing this? Well, the answer, whenever you ask an agency if they think they were justified in their action, the answer is going to be yes, only 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is, as Attorney General, this is one of the issues that I would absolutely work on, because there are so many areas in lands and energy and commerce and elsewhere where the federal government, that's what they do, is they go, the regulators will close lands or roads or leasing rights or things that really impact a lot of the rural areas of Utah. It's beyond their authority, but there's no way to push back. And so that is fundamentally what an attorney general does, is it's the one person in Utah authorized to formally push back from a 10th Amendment standpoint on behalf of the state.
Right. And so how do you see that changing things in Utah?
Well, if the Chevron case changes, there will be a lot. What I will do is I will have a federalism division within the Attorney General's office. We'll sit down with legislators like yourself, and I've already talked about this with the Senate President and the Speaker, and we'll identify areas where I believe that we can move the ball. And I've also met with a lot of attorneys general in other states. And one of the things that's critical is working with other state attorneys general in tandem, where you exercise even more, more power, more influence. That we have 28 Republican attorneys general in this country, and when they all are unified on an issue, believe me, it makes a difference.
Yeah, very good. Hey, we're going to take a break.
Okay,
we'll come back. Okay.
With big tech coming after our kids,
the inflow of illegal drugs coming to our state.
For Attorney General, we need someone we can trust to do the right thing for the right reason.
That's Derek Brown.
Derek fought to protect kids on social media.
He'll defend the Second Amendment.
Stand up to Biden when he tries to take our lands.
Derek Brown will fight to secure the border.
And that's the kind of leadership we really need.
A track record of trust.
We trust Derek Brown for Attorney General.
I'm supporting Derek Brown.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. Of course, we got Derek Brown with us, candidate for Attorney General.
Great to be here.
Hey, great ad.
Hey, thank you.
The whole idea of trust, right? I mean, that's kind of a theme that went throughout that, right?
It's a theme, yeah.
What was the idea behind that? Why do you think that's an important issue?
Well, it's just, as I've talked to people and gone around the state, a lot of them have said, look, we just want someone we can trust. We want someone we know will do the right things for the right reasons, someone that has the best interest of Utah in mind, someone who maybe doesn't necessarily need the job, but feels like this is something they can do to serve. And I think that's kind of what my track record has been through the years, is like when I served as state party chair. I stepped up, I did the best I could, made a difference, stepped out. And same thing when I served in the House of Representatives. And so, my hope is that as Attorney General, I can help Utah kind of frame where we go now, represent what is effectively the state's largest law firm, because most people don't even know that we have almost 300 attorneys in that office, over 500 people total. And really, this is a position where people need to trust you. You need to be transparent. You need to be open, and you need to set a vision and a direction for the office. I mean, this really, it's not a litigator position. It's not a, pit bull attorney position. It's a leadership, vision, organizational position where you've got to work with legislators like yourself, because, the benefit we have of all of us being Republican is that we're on the same page on about 98% of the issues.
Right.
So let's focus on those issues, work together, see what we can get done. And the reality is we can get a lot more done than if we, if we fight.
One of the topics that came up in your ad there was this idea of protecting children on social
Absolutely,
media.
yeah.
And I know, I remember the bills that we were running. You happen to have been working for Meta.
Oh yeah, no, that's one of my clients. Absolutely,
right. And so I think some individuals are having problems with the fact that he's a paid lobbyist for Meta. Right.
Well, I was legal counsel for them.
Yeah.
And what we did is we did government relations. I mean, that's really what it came down to.
And so it wasn't like you were defending and saying that kids should be on social media, right?
No.
So why don't you explain just a little bit of that so people get the nuance to it, right?
Well, what happened? I mean, this is part of being an attorney, and some people don't understand that's the way the legal process works. Everyone deserves representation. I've worked with some of the largest companies on the planet, and just to put it in perspective, the governor said, "Look, we need to address this social media issue with kids," and he's right. This is a problem. I mean, I have 2 teenagers. I mean, this is a big issue, and they'd like TikTok accounts. And as a bad parent, I've said, no, we're not going to give you a TikTok account. But the governor said, we're going to address this in Utah. We're going to be one of the first states to do this. And so Meta, had thousands of attorneys in Utah they could have hired. They hired me. And they said, help us navigate this as an attorney. And so I brought them to the table, and the governor's people and the legislators and the Department of Commerce, and my job wasn't to do anything other than figure out what's the best policy for Utah and for our kids. And that's what we did. I think the legislature ended up with what I think are some really good guardrails to help parents control the internet accounts of their kids, social media accounts, to make sure that, for instance, you can't market to kids, you can't message to them, you can't collect their data. And that's what an effective advocate does, is it works with all the different parties and comes up with a really good solution that works for everyone. And as Attorney General, I mean, that's
the job.
That is the pattern. That's what I would do.
That's why this is a political job, right?
People may not want to hear that, but
right.
If you understand that, you'll be far more effective.
Now, of course, in that negotiation, what's good is that your role was not to really be the solution, right? Your role was bringing people together and figuring out what the best policy is given the issues that
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And that's what a good lawyer does. I mean, people sometimes think that a good lawyer is someone who's in court all the time. If you're in court all the time, let me be honest, you're a bad lawyer, because what that means is you've had umpteen number of opportunities to solve the problem and you didn't do it. And you ended up going to court, which generally means that there's a failure on behalf of one of the parties. That's the worst way to solve an issue. The best way is to bring people together, identify those issues, work together as a team, and figure out how do we resolve these things beforehand. Because if you do that effectively, you conserve your client's resources. And as Attorney General, the resources are taxpayer resources. So the best Attorney General isn't one who just files lawsuits willy-nilly. It's the one who can bring people together and identify solutions and save resources so that you can solve problems rather than litigate them out for 3 years. I mean, that's what a leader does.
So in light of that, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this federal lands issue,
Yeah.
some of the things that we're doing as a state to protect our 10th Amendment rights. We just had this bill that came up that basically said, hey, if we deem that we feel like there's overreach from the federal government that is violating our rights as a state, right, our state sovereignty, then we'll call ourselves into session and we'll basically say, hey, look, if that passes, that resolution, then we'll basically tell the state agencies they cannot enforce the federal law.
Well, and at that point, then it's the job of the Attorney General to represent the state if the federal government files suit against the state. And on the kinds of issues you're talking about in this bill, I mean, these are the big ones. These are the ozone transfer rule type thing. Right. These are the ones that are designed to negatively impact the state of Utah in a massive way, and particularly in areas where the regulators may not have the authority, but they do it anyway. Right. And like
that's why that's why that Chevron case is so important.
Exactly. Exactly, because those are the kind of cases that if Chevron is pulled back to some degree, then from that precedent, we can then file strategic lawsuits that will allow the state to have much more leverage than we currently have right now.
So it's solving this political issue, really.
Exactly. And a good attorney general can lead a team of lawyers to identify those areas and know what appeals will work and what won't work. I mean, part of my legal background is I spent a year working with a federal appeals judge who was in the Philadelphia area, and we saw all sorts of appeals. But the one thing I learned, probably the most beneficial skill from that clerkship, was identifying what issues work on appeal and what don't. Because when we talk about overreach and lawsuits, what we're really talking about are appeals and identifying which appeals are going to work, which ones aren't going to work. And that's what leadership looks like.
Yeah. Well, I know you, like our former governor, current governor, Mike Lee, these people have come forward and said, you're the guy for the job. So what do you think drives that?
Well, and what's interesting is a lot of those people, like the current governor and our senior senator, I mean, they don't always see eye to eye on issues. But there's one reason I think that they've all supported me. It's because I have, like as you saw in this ad, I have a track record of working with people. I have a track record of trust. I have a lot of people in races will say, well, vote for me and I'll do the following things. I can actually point to doing those things, to advocating for those things. And they know that. They've worked with me. And I think all of those individuals want Utah to move forward on the issues that matter from a legal standpoint. But they want someone who's able to make that happen. And I think having worked with them is the reason that while endorsements aren't always the most important thing in a race.
Well, especially this cycle seems to be very anti-incumbent, I think.
Exactly. And so
there's this furor out there that, that we need to change, right?
But and when you've got, everyone, I don't know of any other race where you've got, a former governor, current governor, the senior senator from Utah, the Senate president, and the Speaker of the House all saying, look, we may not see eye to eye on a lot of issues, but on this particular race for Attorney General, there's one person for the job. And so I feel lucky. I feel honored that they've all endorsed me in this race and they're all supporting me. And so, my goal is to live up to that trust.
Very good. Hey, we're out of time.
Thank you.
Why don't you make a pitch to voters?
My name is Derek Brown. I'm running to be Attorney General for the state of Utah. I've spent the last several months all over the state of Utah meeting with voters, and I would be honored for your vote. We have a pivotal, critical window of time right now as a state in light of where the Supreme Court is and a number of really pressing issues that we have as a state. And I'm honored to have the support, the endorsement of people like Governor Cox, former Governor Herbert, Senator Mike Lee, and others for this position. And my goal is to protect some of the most vulnerable that we have in the state of Utah. I'd be honored as well for your support on the primary on June 25th. Thank you again. I'm Derek Brown, and I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you, my friend Derek Brown.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
I appreciate it.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week.